Hi, my name is Roxanne Jones, and welcome to NABJ Women's first webinar series. And thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited today about the program we have planned, and we want to start out with a video with a few words from the women of NABJ. Do we have video? Okay. Hold this up.
We are NABJ Women. We rock.
NABJ Women literally make the world go around.
NABJ Women are sheroes.
NABJ Women, I think, are fierce.
NABJ Women are phenomenal.
NABJ Women are amazing.
NABJ Women are dynamic.
They are powerful, they're inspiring, they're trailblazers.
They are magical, they are excellent, and oh so resilient.
My greatest strength is poise and empathy.
My greatest strength would be tenacity.
My strength lies in my faith in God and my ability to capture the story and write it on paper.
My greatest strength is courage.
My greatest strength is really being able to adapt to any situation and speaking up for the voiceless.
My superpower is being a Black woman. I have always looked at it as a positive, even when some other folks did not.
My greatest superpower is my drive. I will keep going until I find my yes.
My superpower is my creativity.
My superpower is legacy. I know I stand on strong, broad shoulders.
I am on a mission.
I am gritty and compassionate.
I am a quiet storm. I am low on words, but big on actions.
We are here to educate, encourage, support, and uplift each other. We are proud NABJ Women.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yes, to everybody who participated in that video. And now we have a few words from Madam President Dorothy Tucker.
Thank you. That was fabulous. I have to give a shout out to the committee, Roxanne and Cheryl, Leah, Angiana, Kay, you guys really pulled this together. Thank you. Our editor at CBS did a great job. One of the reasons that we wanted to start this project is because, you know, we always talk among ourselves. And I have to tell you, I got the inspiration to do this from a number of women, but in particular, being a part of the Black Women on TV, the Broadcast Sisters, what is it? Is it TV, Women on TV, Black Girls in Broadcasting, and then the sports women. They had something. They had an event, I think, in the fall
conference.
And right. It just showed the strength of all the women, and it just made me see that we really all love to get together. So let's get together more often. Let's take the opportunity for the veterans to teach the young sisters, for the veterans to also exchange some information. So that's what this space is all about. It is all about those who are women in the femmes and everyone who just really wants to, as I said, to really encourage each other. We want to uplift each other. That's the mission of NABJ, hashtag NABJ Women. And I just want to thank everybody and let you know a couple of things. The video, we want to do more videos like that. So if you didn't get a chance to send in your little clips, do it again. We'll be doing something else like that in the future. So we can just kind of let everybody know, hashtag NAB Women, this is who we are, and this is how beautiful we are. Thank you. And I look forward to this session.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I would just add to that, we're here to uplift and help each other and support each other, but we also hope that we will give you some practical tools so you can gain power and influence in your careers, like hands-on experience. And so at the end, we'll ask you for some of your, some ideas for topics you want to discuss, but we really hope you walk away with tools to help you be successful, paid equally, paid limit of the sky, because it's our time. It is the time for Black women, and we want to step up all together. So with that, we're going to look at our situation now for Black women in media. These are some staggering numbers that talk about pay equity and where we are. The yellow numbers are for women in media. So just take a look at those, and please note the gray box, which talks about our national pay equity stats for Black women. As you look at these numbers, you should also remember to use the Q&A chat feature on your screen on the bottom right side, because we'll put your questions in there, and then at the end we'll have 15 minutes or so, and we'll make sure we get all of your questions answered. Thank you, Kay. So let's get on with it. Today, joining us today, we have a fantastic panel for our first webinar. I just want to introduce everybody. First, I'll start with Tara August. She is a Senior Vice President of Talent Relations at Turner Sports. Tara. And then we have Jordyn Holman. Jordyn is a retail reporter at Bloomberg. And last but not least, we have Suzanne de Janasz. She is an author and professor at George Mason University. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Okay, my first question, Jordyn.
Roxanne?
Yes.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
I'm sorry, yes, please.
You know, I was so excited. There were 3 people that I left out who helped on this.
I thought I left somebody out.
No, no, I did. Sia, New Yorker, Cheryl Smith, and Kay, who's staring right at me, and I did name them. So I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I am so far the worst. And you guys have to know there's no way in the world the video would have gotten done, or any of this would have gotten done without those women as well. So please forgive me. Know that my heart, Cheryl, Sia, Kay, y'all know me. My heart's in the right place. It's just, I was excited after seeing the video. I just lost. I'm also going to drop out of this. I will be on, but Kay, if you can delete my face, get rid of my mugshot here, and then so that I can just listen, since you guys are the stars. All right.
Dorothy, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jordyn, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So as a reporter, I've noticed that you've covered the gender pay gap. You've looked at how other countries are making pay transparency a priority in their workforce. And also here in the US, I know this is happening at some tech companies and places like Netflix. It seems to really be taking off. So I have a 3-part question for you. What can you tell us about how more people are sharing their salary information? Why is this pay transparency movement kind of taking off now? And what, in your opinion, are the pros and some cons of this movement?
Great, yeah. So before I was covering retail, I was on Bloomberg's diversity and management team back in 2017 and 2018. And that's really when we started to see this conversation about pay transparency really pick up. And that was because some new legislation was happening in the UK for big companies that they had to report their gender pay gap. And then a lot of global companies in the US just said, we're already crunching the numbers. So let's do it over here and tell our workers and then the rest of America what our pay transparency looks like, or our pay gap. So what we're seeing is all the stats that you guys put up before. And the reason for even having the conversation about pay transparency and the gender pay gap is so people could have information. Because in the US, companies have really benefited from the silence that we have around talking about pay and how much the person sitting next to you, or I guess in this virtual world, is getting paid. And so by even having those numbers out there that have to be reported, that is a benefit to workers like us, so we can see where our company stands. It's a bit tricky though, because there's things like adjusted pay gaps where companies can say, well, based off of this title and this seniority and all those things, if you account for that, then really there is no pay gap or it's really minimal. And so I think to the other points that you asked me about, that's when those one-on-one conversations become really crucial. And that is a pro to having this discussion about pay transparency. By identifying people you feel comfortable at work with and just talking about pay, either in a ballpark range or just actual numbers, that goes a long way in just empowering yourself when it comes time for review season and just, those updates, yearly, mid-year updates with your boss. And also I found it's been really helpful to even know what language to use when talking to managers, because we might know like, oh, I feel like I need to be paid more. But once you get into that conversation with your manager, at least for me, I sometimes like all the thoughts I had go out my mind. And I'm like, oh shoot, what was I supposed to say? So even keywords with more sophisticated people or people who have done this negotiation process really helps. So yeah.
That's good. That's really helpful information. I noticed when we were prepping for this conversation, there were no specific stats for Black women in media and the racial pay gap that we face. There are lots, even the stat we put up with the yellow numbers, we were tucked into people of color, which always happens. So it's actually frustrating to not be able to have a specific conversation about how Black women in media. And that's something that we've been talking about, Kay and I and Dorothy, and we hope to start some analytics around that. I don't know if you've ever seen numbers like that for Black women in media in the US or anybody else here on this panel.
I have not. I would love to hear if other people have, because that's where it really comes to just asking around and seeing what the ballpark or places like Glassdoor can be really helpful. Because one, you can see the ballpark range, but also people who either currently work at a company or previously worked at a company will sometimes drop that in there. And even crucially, will drop in the culture of the company. So then you can navigate those conversations by reading other people's experiences.
Thank you. That is a good site. Next question goes to Tara and then Suzanne. So Tara, you're an executive at a big company. I know you've hired and maybe fired a lot of people. You've seen a lot of salaries. Can you talk to us about what some of the best practices are for negotiating salaries, benefits, and all of the stuff in between that we talk about when moving on in our careers?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is you have to do some homework and some research, and that is, steeped in things like Glassdoor, but it's really about asking yourself what's important, what you think your value is, having conversations. As much as we all want to be paid, the most amount that we can, sometimes it's not possible with budgets, right? So you can ask for, let's say, $100,000 a year. If their true budget is 85, you may never get to 100. So you need to ask yourself, what's the most important thing here for you? Is it the money? Is it benefits? Is it location? What are some other valuable priorities that you can bake into your kind of compensation conversation? Certainly, like I said, doing your homework and researching what others are doing and making helps inform you. But everyone's story is different. Everyone's path is different. So what I try to remind, especially women, is don't be afraid to take a good offer. If something feels right to you, if it meets your needs, don't be afraid to take it. Bet on yourself. If you feel like this is a one-year deal or maybe it's contract work that you want it to lead you to bigger and greater, bet on yourself that you're going to improve and impress along the way to start ratcheting up those dollars and opportunities. That's what a lot of men do. I'll tell you, when men come in and negotiate, they'll often say, I want the opportunity. Here's what I think my value is, my worth is. And then along the way, here's what my expectations are, and here's where I want to grow. So I'd certainly challenge everybody to think about that as a tactic as well. But making sure that you're comfortable when you do take the offer, that you're comfortable from the offset, but where you land.
So in that's great advice. I have a question for you that relates. Would you recommend that going into a new job, negotiating your salary or a contract, women forecast that out. So if they take a deal, you use your $100,000, okay, 85 is going to be my top. Would you recommend they forecast out? So in year 1 or year 2, where am I at? Looking at their potential for more money.
For sure. Yeah. And you have to dialogue. It's all going to vary per person and per place, but you can say, hey, my expectations were a little bit higher, but can we project out for year 2? Can we say, hey, if things are rolling well, then in year 2, I really want to grow incrementally in the dollars and try to project that out early. You can get very nimble with things. So while you might be reticent on a figure, if you are, be prepared to have a walk away. So if it really is about, I have to make $100,000, I'm not selling for less, that's okay. But be ready to sort of stand your ground and move on from that, or be able to have some flexibility, because again, unless you can really pull back the curtain, you don't really know what their true budget is. And 100 may be well above what they were willing and able to pay, or maybe below. But you've got to, you've got to sort of suss that out as you go along in the negotiation. I always remind people too, like, you've got to believe your number before anybody else will. So if you don't believe it, then they're not going to believe it. So if you say, you know what, here's what my figure is, what I want, but you're sort of squeamish, or you're asking, or you look a little trepidatious, right, people can kind of feel that out. If you're really reticent about where you want to be and why, they will believe and find favor in that and say, okay, how can I get you there? Or how close can I get you?
Just one last question on that. Oh, I'm sorry. So and we'll get to you in one sec. You can answer this too. Are people still, I know in the early 2000s, in the mid, corporations, company, anybody was asking you how much you were making in your last job. And I never wanted to answer that question. It's not a legal question. What do you say about that question? I know people are still getting it. I feel like it's a way to lowball us and has nothing to do with the new company we're going to. But what is your advice? Are people still asking that? Should we answer it? What should we say?
To your point, I don't think it's legal. I've never asked it. I don't think it has any bearings, right? And imagine if someone was paying you more, I would sort of flip it. If I was on this side and somebody brought that to me, I would say, well, somebody might have overpaid you somewhere. I'm not going to meet that threshold just because they've overpaid you. So if they've underpaid you, that's not fair for me to, meet you there. So I don't find it favorable for anybody, and they shouldn't be basing it on what your previous salary rate was. Previous experience, for sure. Previous trajectory, for sure. Previous title, all of those things. But the previous money shouldn't really come into the conversation.
Exactly. Okay. I just wanted to confirm that, because that still gets asked a lot, I hear from young people. Suzanne, jump in anywhere you want. Yes, I have another question.
Before you, just to kind of say more about what Tara just said about forecasting, and I think this is really important. You may not know this, but let's just say you didn't have the gumption, or you didn't really feel that strength of asking for that difference, that starting salary. Here's a statistic that'll blow you away. If you look at when people start their careers, let's say out of college, 22, if Roxanne, you and I were graduating at the same time, and we both had this offer, but you negotiated for $7,000 more at the start, assuming certain, like 3% interest over the years, increases, et cetera, over the course of a career, $649,000. That $7,000 difference at age 22, by the time you're at 65, and that's understated. So right. I just want to reinforce what Tara is saying. Thinking about that projection, being shy is not only going to hurt you right out of college, it's going to hurt you across your career because of the compounding.
It costs you nothing to ask. It really doesn't. It costs you nothing to ask. You don't come in demanding, especially if you're starting young in your career. But it doesn't hurt anything to ask, hey, is there some movement here? Here's what I think, this position requires and what that equates to. Here's what I understand about the industry or the market or the role. It costs you nothing to ask.
Absolutely.
And can I just jump into that? Into that point, I know just like as a somewhat young person, I've learned that it gets easier every time. Like this is definitely an art. So like practice early on, and then by the time you're 30, it just kind of comes backhand, just keep doing it.
Yes. Negotiations they're so layered. There's so many factors. I've read, books, and I just sort of take a little bit from everything, but the underlying thing is just confidence. When you go in and you feel great about it and you feel like you've got your information and you feel positive and you're projecting sort of what you want, that goes a long way.
Right. You can also role play with yourself in the mirror of the conversation and write it down. Write down what you want to say. That's how I would do it. I asked for every raise I ever got and got it. Suzanne, your specific question here is, as we've talked about negotiations and Tara mentioned other things, location, benefits that are of value. Can you share with us a surprising perk or benefit that many women either don't know exists or we don't think to ask for when negotiating for our salaries?
Let me just first say a word about, I've spent the last 25 years of my career not only teaching negotiation, but on 5 different continents. So I've got a lot of experience, very passionate about not just negotiating, but women trying to close the gap in the workplace, written textbooks, et cetera. So to this question, I want to focus on the question, Roxanne, in terms of both what and how. Okay. Right? So from the what perspective, Tara and Jordyn are absolutely right that there are other things that provide value to us that may not show up in the salary. Compensation is bigger than salary. So where the budget may be tight, I think the example was, we can only get up to 85,000. Bonuses, for example, are in a completely different bucket. And they may be tied to performance, which is really good for someone who is a high achiever. It says, fine, I'll put $15,000 at risk, but I'm going to show you just how capable I am. Other things that may be possible is stop fighting the number, change the job classification. One thing I've noticed in the pandemic is people started doing things that they didn't even know they could do, like social media and managing projects that they hadn't before. And sometimes you are stuck in a band. This is the max salary for a particular job classification or salary band. Look at the job description for the next position and place yourself in that space and say, actually, I'm doing 89% of this job. I deserve the salary that goes with this job. So that's another way of looking at it. And then other things like, for example, tuition reimbursement. Sure, that has an absolute value, but it also signals your passion for getting better, learning more, being more skilled in your job. So that can have multiple benefits. So that's the what. The other thing I want to say as far as how is many women feel uncomfortable, right? It's the B word, right? It's okay for a guy to be assertive, but somehow when a woman is, she's the B, right? And so one of the things the research is really clear on is when women present what they're looking for as though they were advocating for my department, for my family, for the university, for the broadcast organization, they are not only more comfortable, but they tend to be more successful, and they kind of are able to get away from that spotlight of, oh, she's being, aggressive. So advocating on the part of others. And also there are a lot of persuasion skills that we can develop, how we present what we want, how it's going to make their world more effective, more efficient, more, freeing up your boss to be able to focus on higher level, more strategic things, while creating this legacy in you by enabling you to take on these other things, for example. So there's not just the what, but also the how.
That's good. Thank you very much. I want to go back to some of those points, but we have a lot of questions coming in from the audience watching. So I want to get to some of those. And I think, Kay, are you going to queue up the questions for us?
I sure am. Hello, y'all. I am behind the scenes. So Kennedy here asks, what is your personal experience with having a conversation with an employer about your worth?
I can take that, I think, and then anybody else. At ESPN, of course, it was very hard when I first started out, but what I started doing is role-playing this conversation that we're talking about and actually writing a script for it. And I did that after lots of research, and I would always ask people what they made. Sometimes, especially Black folks, we don't like talking about our money, but a ballpark figure, are you making 35? Are you making 60? Are you making more than 80? Are you making 100? Give me some, and I would speak to everybody, Black people, white men, white women always make more than us. So the 7,000 Suzanne was talking about and the 600,000 over your career is a lot that I saw with my salaries and the salaries of white women who sometimes were not even as experienced. So it is really important to get the research. But I would take that script in when I wanted to, when it was maybe around performance evaluation time, and you know, my hands would be shaking, I'd be nervous my first few times, but I would really stick to the script and use some of what Suzanne said. I would justify the, you know, I would talk about the job I had done, the performance marks that I had hit and exceeded. I took data in. If my job was sales, which it was for some point, I would know how much money I made, how much money my content made. And so I monetized this. That wasn't even one of my performance things, for example. So know what your markers are for the performance, describe how you hit those and exceeded those. And then I would have a number. I would have a title that I wanted, and I would also have a number. And I would say that this is what I want to do. And Suzanne, you made me laugh when you said be creative about the classification, because for myself and also for a lot of Black women, I've noticed we make up the jobs that we want. You know, like I just had some titles. I was like, I want to be VP of Publishing / sales / fashion director. Like whatever I saw a void, and I'd say like, oh, I can move in these circles. Because the traditional career steps, I think a lot of those are thrown out of the window now, but not always. I think that we don't often get taken seriously at first in that way. That's where the white men are plodding along. So be creative, but practice in front. Tara?
Can I offer there, Roxanne? So what you're saying is true. We have the data that proves it, right? But as someone who, you know, I have to you know, work with agents all the time. I work with big name talents all the time, and I work with internal staff, and everybody wants, you know, to climb, and everybody wants more. I'd just be careful about making assumptions unless you know it to be true. Yes. So if you know the person next to you with the same title or maybe a lesser title has told you exactly what they make, and you are being paid less, then you can go in and say, I know factually this is happening. Otherwise, be very careful about challenging. I know that I'm underpaid compared to every white man in this building. If you don't know it for a fact, what you can say is historically, women of color, Black women, we've been on the lower end of the pay scale, and I want to feel confident in pay equity, and especially right now. Take advantage that pay equity is on the tip of everyone's lips, right? Every corporation is being held accountable differently. Some are opening books, some are not, but internally they're still taking a look. So the one thing that you can always and should say when you're in the negotiation or when you've been made an offer is this fair and equitable? If the books were open, could you stand by this number that I am being paid the same as my colleagues and somebody who's similarly situated to me? And then further than that, you can say, if you're not super satisfied with the number, you can also say, can I ask you to take a look at it again? And can we get back together tomorrow? And that gives them an out, because then they can go, oh my gosh, I didn't look, or I did look and the numbers are off, but now I have an out to go, you know what? I can come back tomorrow and say, oh, we missed something. Yeah. And now we're going to put it in, because what they owe you is an answer to your face, looking you in the eye saying, this is fair and equitable. You are making much as Joey and Johnny and Bill and everybody else. And if not, they would really, you know, be on the spot if they weren't. One other just sort of negotiation tactic, when Suzanne was talking about bonuses, just make sure when you get a bonus, and I hate when agents do this to me, but it's a good trick, is make sure that you add that in for the next time, right? So if your salary is the $85K and then you get a $15,000 bonus based on incentive, make sure when you go in the next time you're negotiating off of that 100 instead of the 85. So just, you know, look at it as your full package, and even some of your benefits. Sometimes you can try to quantify that and throw that into the number, but always try to operate off and negotiate off the higher number.
One more teeny tiny point building on what Tara said, as I mentioned before, advocating, right? So when we advocate for somebody else, we might say, very similar to what Tara said, I know that diversity and equity is really important to ESPN. So clearly this is something not only in the best interest for the organization, but for me and my colleagues as well. And it's a statement like that. You can't argue with that.
Well, people do all the time argue with that. They might not argue to your face, but you know, there's a reason we are sometimes not reaching pay equity. So all of these are pointers. And again, I love what Tara said about, it's not a defensive conversation. It's not, you know, John makes this and that's always a lose-lose. So with your notes and just be your authentic self, but really hold back, you know, be nice, you know, just be nice. That's it. No matter what you're feeling about who's getting paid what and what information, what facts you have, you're going in to have a conversation and to show that you're an employee and you're invested in the work you're doing, you're invested in the mission of whatever whoever you're working for, and you want to be a part of it, and you want to feel good about being there. And so it's not a defensive, aggressive. I mean, we're seen as aggressive anyway, so let's just take that off the board. There are some racial factors, a lot, that factor into these salary negotiations, but you don't, need to be in their face like with accusations. That's what I'm trying to say. So, okay, let's move on. Do we have any more questions, Kay, that we want
We
answered?
have a ton of questions, which is really great. Folks are commenting in the chat, and I want to open this up because we have so many questions. I'm thinking let's do one question per panelist, and then the other panelists, feel free, like, you can keep the conversation going in the chat. A lot of folks are doing that right now. So we do have a question from Courtney. Courtney wants to know, what should you do if you find out you are underpaid for a position? How should you go about getting parity with coworkers for same job responsibilities? Who wants to answer that one?
Jordyn, do you want to take that?
Sure, I'll take that. Yeah, it's interesting because usually pay conversations often come up once a moment like this happens. Like something has to usually trigger you to be like, oh wait, I'm getting underpaid, or I'm not. I realize my worth is more, So that's a really awkward situation. So like if you feel sad or shame or all those things, like acknowledge that it is an emotional thing because you work hard, we put in a lot of hours. So I think I would just like say that off front, because sometimes you think of it as an individual failure, but it's like a structural failure when those things happen. So then the next thing is like what to do next. I would set up a meeting with your manager, kind of know like the organization you're in. So like, is it more of a, like, just figure out the way that they want to communicate. So go through that way. And then very similar to what Roxanne was saying, prepare. Think about, like, say the words out loud, to yourself, to your mom, before you're saying it to your manager for the first time. And then just talk through the situation and say, explain like your wins of the year and all of those things, and be very direct in like the number that you're asking for, or at least the percent rise that you're asking for, and not just kind of this amorphous, like, I should be getting paid more. Because when you go in with like a specific number, that shows that you're serious about business. And then there's also this thing called like anchoring. So like once you're the one who throws out the number first, then it raises, like, then they have to say a number, and it becomes like that, like, art of negotiating that I was mentioning earlier. After that, I would say, like, maybe temper your expectations, because they might then say, well, I hear you, but we can't do it in this pay cycle, or let's think about other ways. But going back to what Tara was saying earlier, think about like, where is your stopping ground? Like, is it okay, to go 6 more months without an increase of salary, or like, can you negotiate on a benefits things or something else, or try to get assurance? So think about what you want to get out of that conversation, and just maybe acknowledge that it won't get solved right away, but you have to be persistent, and you have to like ask, okay, like, if not today, then is it next February? Is it in the summer? And just keep pushing. And it might feel really awkward because you're like, I shouldn't have to do this. People should just treat me right, but you have to do it for yourself.
Yeah. I just add there too, if it's a comparison, I'd ask them, walk me through what the difference is between my role and their role, because I believe it to be the same. So maybe they'll give you information that might shine a light on why, there's a difference in compensation, their role might be different. So just ask them for that information, and don't assume that you come in knowing everything. Really ask a lot of questions up front, and certainly along the way, if the conversation leads you to believe, oh, we actually are very similar, then even greater, right? Then you're in agreement that you're the same, and then you're better positioned to ask for more money.
Perfect. Okay, next question.
All right, this next one comes from Leah, and this one's actually for Suzanne. Leah says, oftentimes when women advocate for themselves, tension arises. The microaggression kicks in, and I've had managers actually make a counter list of why I should not only be rejected a raise, but am, quote, lucky to have a job. That one comes from Leah. So, Suzanne, any advice?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I want to echo what I've heard. It's so important to practice. And I'll come back to this microaggression in a moment. Quick example, I was teaching an executive program for negotiation, women only, and it was designed that way on purpose. Women only negotiate a quarter of the time that their male counterparts do. And I asked this question, imagine you're in insert name of upscale department store here, and you see this great pair of shoes, and you learn maybe on your app that they go on sale 30% off tomorrow. What would you do? All of these high-powered women in my room, except for one, said, yeah, I guess I'll just come back tomorrow. I was horrified. So my advice to all of you is, if you don't practice the everyday negotiations with the neighbor, with the cable company, with your partner about chores, things like that, what makes you think that all of a sudden you're going to rise above competently and confidently asking for a raise? So I'm going to take a step back and start thinking about how important it is to flex that negotiation muscle so that it is in shape when you're having this conversation, and that when you get that kind of pushback, you see it in light of okay, I understand that you're concerned about X. Can you tell me more why this is not a possibility today? What will it take for this to be possible, and when? And let me also say too, money is important. Money kind of helps us gauge where we are, what our value is in our companies as well as in the industry. But money isn't everything. I'd rather take a 10% pay cut and work in an organization where I'm appreciated, where diversity and inclusion are not just words on people's mouths, but actually a real thing. So I think it's also important to kind of step back and think about what makes you feel good. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 more and a toxic work environment? No, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was
Right.
really good advice. Okay, next one.
Yes, I think this next one, which is from Anonymous, could be really good for you, Tara, as someone who, as Roxanne mentioned, does hiring and firing. So Anonymous wants to know, how does the virtual world change salary negotiations? What can people expect when negotiating, considering the current economy?
It really depends on what the role is. I haven't found if you're talking about on-camera positions, there's still a fair equity pay scale, and we're still sticking to that. I haven't seen that we've been reducing rates if the roles are staying the same. If you're working virtually and your new employer or your place of employment says that's easier or it's less valuable, I think you're going to have to kind of figure out sort of what your must-haves and what your foundational standard is. I wouldn't go in automatically assuming, sorry, I don't know what's going on with the video, automatically assuming that you'll get paid in a world, you'll get paid differently in the current state that we're in. Sorry, I'll fix my video.
I think also,
go ahead, Jordyn. Go ahead.
I think also the way I interpreted part of that question is even just like the interaction is not in person, it's virtual. So that kind of does change the dynamic when you're going and talking. Like I negotiated my salary in September, so it was a virtual thing. And in some ways, it was so much easier to have my notes here and they couldn't see my hands shaking and all of those things. And so just even thinking about the different platforms, this is kind of an advantage. You can, even if you need a tab open, like to have like the advice that your mom or your cousin or whoever gave you, like think about just those tools that we can use in this virtual world.
Before we get to the next question, I just want to address Leah's question was not completely answered about the microaggressions. And I do think that is a real thing that I can only speak for Black women, that we face. There are many, many microaggressions that go on, both in our daily jobs and certainly when we sit down to negotiate. And so we can only handle, I think, our side of that conversation. You know, we know that we're not going to, someone who is looking at us as some aggressive, assertive, be lucky you have this job, little Black girl. And we're not going to be able to change that, right? So we have to be prepared with the conversation, with the talking points we want, with our expectations. And I think Tara said it earlier, we also have to be prepared to leave a place that is toxic, that is not seeing our value, and where we don't feel good about being. And so, you know, that I think has maybe happened to all of us. So if you find yourself in that situation, just surrounded by, I've got this wall, they're never going to see me as, you know, an equal part of this team, then start making your exit plan, you know, or if you can't get out right away, maybe pivot to a job or a position, try to tweak your responsibilities to something that might give you more fulfillment and learn something that you need for the next job. You know, so a lot of times we can't leave a job, that might be now, but what other skills do I need that I could take with me? So I always feel like you're working for a place, you can use them. You use them to build up your skill set. You know, you work for Disney or whoever you work for, there's a lot of things that are big companies or even smaller companies, digital companies, play around and learn as much as you can. So when you get to the next place, you've got all these skills that you can then monetize and discover and grow. Because maybe that's another webinar, like just microaggressions Black women face and how we can deal with those.
Well, it's interesting, you know, the term microaggression in my parlance is not as in your face as the example, oh, you're lucky just to have a job. It's a little bit more subtle, like, oh, I thought your people liked X. You know, the stupid things that were said. So the only thing that I would say in reference to that is get some practice being able to be direct and honest and open and confront, and to say something like, right now I'm feeling very uncomfortable having this conversation with you. I feel like I was just offended. Is there any way that we could pause this conversation and pick it up tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And not flinch. Right. But I think sometimes people who speak that way get no feedback or don't hear any feedback about what jerks they are. So it's helpful just to kind of hold the mirror up and say, yeah, that's just not cool. Yes. And then look for another job.
Right. And then look for another job. I mean, I get calls just this month from Black women in media who have been told this. So it is a real thing. We're told it all the time, even in today's conversation about, you know, diversity and inclusion and all of this stuff. So it is going on. And so I love your pointers, Suzanne and Jordyn, and I do think it's something for us to further discuss, to get those skill sets to deal with it and get help too. Yeah. So, okay. I hope that's good, Leah. Next question.
So Erica here wants to know, how do you determine what your salary range should be when employers ask? And then I'll add in as well, in terms of salary range, we got a couple of questions about transparency as well. You know, if your employer or someone is asking, what do you want? How do you work around navigating that conversation? So a two-part question. How do you determine what your salary range should be when employers ask? And when they ask you what your salary is, what do you say?
Well, you've got to start with a baseline, right? A foundation of some kind of information based on your previous salary history, based on what you find online, based on what you ask, you know, colleagues and coworkers. And then, you know, again, where we started, get honest with yourself of like, okay, if I'm doing this job or this promotion or this opportunity, what am I throwing into their expectations, and what do I feel, you know, would be commensurate with that? You know, don't be afraid to throw out an honest number. You know, if you're double what they've got, they'll tell you that. And then you need to hear their side about what they think commiserates with the position. But people sometimes are afraid to throw out the first number because they think, oh, it's going to be way too low or way too high and undervalue myself. Try to get some kind of information that's going to at least steer you in the ballpark, and then shoot your shot. I think somebody did ask about, like, is there such thing about going back too many times? Yes. You do not want to, you know, get to a point where you're not listening. If they're saying, this is where we're netting out, this is our final offer, this is the best, I've looked in every seat cushion for you and gotten every bit of dollars I can, and you continue to go back and back, you can get to a point where somebody's feeling frustrated. So really think about the number that you want and try to push the paper back. I'd say just a few times, back and forth a few times, and then settle.
And building on something Jordyn said before about anchoring, when I've gotten the question, oh, what were you expecting to get in this position? I would turn it around and say, what are you paying somebody with 20 years experience and XYZ accomplishments? So, to turn it back on them, what is it that you're expecting to pay for somebody who has these responsibilities and these credentials?
Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid. Sometimes you can say, I feel more comfortable if you make me an offer, and we go from there to see if they're willing, put the ball back in their court, to Suzanne's point, and see if they're willing to toss out the first offer.
Tara, we're running out of time. We want to get to questions, but I do want to talk agents with you because I want you to kind of talk to us about who needs an agent, when you should get an agent, what they should do for you, and some tips on how to find that person.
Yeah, so it's different for everyone. I wouldn't say everyone needs an agent or no one needs an agent. It's particular to your particular situation. I've worked with, writers and on-camera talent who have had agents and some who didn't. It deals directly. There's no perfect way, but I'd say when you start thinking about an agent, you should shop around, you should sort of date around, talk to a lot of different agents, get advice from colleagues, talk to network executives. Have you worked with this agent before? What's your experience? What's their vibe? Do they represent people that you work with? A lot of agents will overstate, oh, I know Tara, I love, and I'm like, they'll sort of, yes, they'll sort of give the idea that they're super close to every TV executive, which may or may not be true. But when you're talking to agents and trying to figure out who's right for you, or if you need one, I would certainly ask them, can you show me examples of people similarly situated to me, just like me, who you've helped, clients that you've had that wanted to grow and wanted to move from editorial to on camera, or wanted to move from a different market, or wanted to go national, or wanted to break into sports or technology. Like, let them give you examples. If they've represented some of the biggest names in the business, that's great. If they represent Shaquille O'Neal, that's fantastic, but you're probably not Shaquille O'Neal. So your path and your needs are going to be a little bit different. I would also ask them, if I hire you today, if we work in partnership today, tell me 5 opportunities that are out there that you would start to put me in line for, because that's their biggest asset to you. Because you could easily call me and email me, and I take your call and say, hey, here's what we've got going. You may not have the time to do that. You may not know how to reach me, or who's in my spot at ESPN, or who's in my spot at Fox. So they should be doing all that legwork, and they should be able to tell you, oh, you're a sideline reporter. I know that in 6 months, XYZ Network's gonna be looking for a sideline reporter. I also know that this opportunity is coming up. So that will start to inform you about if they can be a benefit to you, and then who's really the right fit for you too.
That's perfect. Thank you. And, just to sum all that up, one thing, if you can do it, no matter where you are in your career, whether you're in the digital space, TV, writing, an influencer, the question of an agent is always relevant for you. And one thing that helps is if you just get to know agents as people, follow their career, invite them out for coffee, have a Zoom call, just get to know who they are and what their character is. They have a ton of insight. If they're good, they have a lot of information. We're talking about pay transparency. Nobody knows better than the people cutting the deals for everybody what people are making. And they will tell you, because they're not, running the corporations, not coming out of their pocket. So network agents the same way that you network your sources, so then by the time you need one, you're feeling comfortable with, like, yeah, she's pretty good, or I like him, he seems like, and you're not just doing it, on the spot with a lot of pressure for your next deal. So there is one more question, Kay, right, from Chantel?
Yes, well, Chantel asked in the chat a question about an attorney and whether or not maybe that's a good alternative or, an avenue. And I thought that was related to the conversation. So I don't know if anyone has any quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, an attorney is going to look over your contracts for you and keep you protected there. They traditionally won't find you the opportunity. So if you're comfortable in that you're going to be able to find your next gig or get your next promotion or renewal, then you can certainly just work with an attorney on hand to make sure that your paperwork's in line.
So, okay, thank you. So Kay, do you want to address the poll now, the poll question?
Yes, and as we pull up the poll, or maybe before we do that, just real quick, NABJ, just for everyone tuned in, which is so many of you, so exciting. NABJ is going to drop in a few links, a few resources from our lovely panelists, articles that they have written, resources, again, Suzanne, Roxanne, and again, you have everyone's social media handles, all of this great information is out there, and I'm just so excited that we're having this. So yeah, so let's kick it off to the poll. One moment, there it is, and yeah, take it in. And
you want us to fill it out now?
Yes. So as you see the poll on your screen, take a moment, read the question. What's your gut reaction? And then we'll get those answers. See what everyone says.
Okay.
And the poll question, just for anyone who maybe, I don't know if you're having trouble, but it's, do you feel like you're getting advancement opportunities at your company or in the media industry? The options are yes, somewhat, no, undecided. And then maybe after, once we get the results in, maybe someone on the panel can answer, give some advice on how to get those advancement opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Do we have time while people are doing the poll? Should we just do any wrap up? Anyone on the panel have a last word or advice? Tara, I know we talked about the one simple question you can ask to make sure your offer is fair and equitable. Do you have a question? Or did you already talk about that?
Yeah, it's what I said before. Ask, is this fair and equitable?
Yep.
And and give them a beat and say, would you, can I ask you to spend more time to double check and to, make sure, and can we circle back in, a day or so? If the books were open, are you comfortable that this would stand as fair and equitable?
Great.
I just want to share another related concept based on what Kay just asked about networking. I also am very keen on the gender differences in networking. Men and women professionals tend to network similarly, but as far as surrounding themselves with mentors, women tend to surround themselves with peers as mentors. Men tend to surround themselves with advanced people, those who are superior to them. And so there's some reasons why we don't have time to get into that. But one of the things I would suggest as far as getting more advancement opportunities, don't just have friends and peers as mentors and colleagues, but also get comfortable talking to your boss's boss and other people, because those sponsors are going to open more doors for you. It's not either or, both are important, but don't avoid having people who are in positions of power to be people you go out to coffee with or have a virtual happy hour with, to be in their network, to be in their face, and to get some counseling from them. They learn from you almost as much as you learn from them.
Yes.
It's a great point. And usually someone, if you're meeting somebody who's senior in your organization, you can perhaps use them as a sounding board. Hey, I want to have this really tough conversation. Here's where I'm headed. And they might give you some insights of how to have that conversation, or something, kind of steer you, say, hey, maybe your timing, maybe you want to wait on timing, or just share some insights that could be helpful.
Yes, I love that advice, Suzanne. That's something that I think we can be better at. A lot of times, we're challenged with these issues. We're talking about negotiations and microaggressions, and we forget that networking goes up too. So don't have any hesitancy at all. Have something to say, but to ask the president of the company, your department head, anyone, just, can we sit down and grab coffee? Or now, can we have a Zoom chat? I just wanted to say hello, get to know you, and have like an agenda talking point. But all of that speaks to telling your own story and having people get to know you for who you are. And if it's informal, not to report a problem that you need to go through the channels to report, but to really just get to know them. And have something interesting to say. So don't forget to do that. It's super, super important.
And everyone should be on LinkedIn. I know some folks I come across, they're so early in their career, they're like, oh, that's not for me. It's a fantastic way to target how you connect with people within industry or company, And once you connect with someone you know or someone you know who knows someone, it's a great entree to making that connection with somebody either in or outside your company.
All right, everyone, real quick, if you don't mind, but we have 5 minutes to go. I just want to quick read the results. You should see it on your screen as well, but it looks like we have 33% say yes, they feel they're getting advancement opportunities, 36% say somewhat, 34% say no, and 8% say undecided. And 75% of participants, have voted thus far, which is a really good amount. So, hopefully we'll be able to take this information and then provide resources moving forward. So continue to, take these in our future webinars. So I'm going to leave it to you, Roxanne, to take us home and leave us to this outro.
Okay, so thank you for answering the poll. Continue that other 25%. Please give us your information. We like to collect data on these webinars. So thanks for that. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the panelists. You women were excellent helping us kick these webinars off. To everybody involved, have a wonderful Saturday. And please, please let us know what kind of programming you want from NABJ Women. We want your suggestions. We plan to have another webinar in March. So please, anything you want discussed that would help you in your careers, just drop us an email. Anybody on this panel, certainly to Dorothy, and tell us what you want to hear, because we want to hear from you. All right. Have a great Saturday. Thanks
Roxanne. Thanks, Kay.
Thank you.
Bye.